Well, welcome to the Cup for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. My name is Pastor Clay. I'm joined by Eric Stearns, and we're going to be digging into my message from Sunday, which was on the idea of God giving us daily bread. What does it mean for us to rely on God every single day for the provisions that we do need? And so we'll be talking about some times where we've experienced that in life and for real, and then just what that has to do with us as people of faith. So let's get into it. So as a member of a different household, Eric, is bread as big of a deal in your house as it is in our house? Are we the weird one?
Oh, yeah. We're trying really hard to not have noodles at every meal, but man, it's almost every meal. I mean, because it just works with kids.
It
Like
does.
they'll actually eat it. I realize that it's not always the healthiest thing, but hey, if you put meat in a sauce and put it on a noodle, they have a way better chance of eating it than if you just have meat separate. So
That's very true.
I'll take it.
That is very true. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
the question that gets asked in our house a lot is, what do you guys want for supper? And the answer is almost always mac and cheese. And like we
Every time.
always do that, but just that happened just today. But one of our kids said cheeseburgers, one of our kids said mac and cheese, and we just so happened to have leftover macaroni, cheeseburger, macaroni and cheese in the fridge. So
Well, there you go.
everybody won.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Yes, mac and cheese is often requested. We don't give it to them nearly as much as they would like us to. But,
Same.
But yeah, no, bread is a staple. Buying multiple loaves every time. It's just, yes, we fly through it.
That's good. I'm glad we're not the weird ones. I'll take that. I guess one of the things I joked about at the start of the sermon was, just that this phrase is short, and can lead to it being a boring sermon. And, I said, I hope that wasn't what's going to happen, but, I'll have to hear at the end of church and see what people thought. So as one that has listened to the sermon, Eric, were you bored?
No, I was not bored. Nope.
Perfect.
It kept me engaged on my way home today. So that was good. Sometimes my mind tends to wander, so you did a good job.
Good deal.
But did you do a straw poll with the rest of the congregation?
No, I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. No, it was kind of just the mad dash from after worship into Bible study. And so.
Oh, sure.
Yep. So, but we had a good conversation in Bible study afterwards about the sermon, but also then just about what we're talking about in Bible study. But, this phrase is just one of those things that, like I said on Sunday, part of it is just the literal truth of we recognize that God is the one that is providing. That is God that provided throughout Israel's history. It is also God who provided Jesus in the first place, and then through Jesus, God provided more and abundantly more, and just in our own lives. One of the questions I do have is just: has there ever been a time in your life where you've just really recognized the fact that it is the provision of God that came through for you? Has there ever been a time where you really just where that daily bread has been just something that was so tangible for you?
I don't have a good answer to that question specifically,
Mm-hmm.
or one specific instance. What I always think about with this portion of the Lord's Prayer is farming in general, and we've talked about this before. But you shove seed in the ground, sometimes in dry ground,
Right,
and all you can do is pray that it comes through. I remember 2012, we had a drought. It was the worst drought we've had in my memory. I think probably in Dad's memory too, or very close to it.
Sure.
He's done that for, he's farmed for 40 some years. But in 2013, the spring was still dry. And I can remember I was out tilling a field, and Dad said, stop, because I don't want to till up the topsoil so much that we have almost, zero moisture. And he was already worried about what we had tilled, if there'd be zero moisture and the crop would grow. Well,
right.
Lo and behold, 2013 was one of the best years I've ever had. And so it's just, yes, there are times in our lives, there are times in our lives that things don't go as we planned. In 2012, we can say, well, God didn't provide for us because we didn't have
Right.
a harvest,
Right.
but we were never hungry.
Mm-hmm.
There was a large part of the United States, corn belt that it was terrible, and yet we were fine.
Right.
You just think about it. And then we had a great year in 2013. So
Mm.
what we lost the year before was made up for. And to me, that's a God thing. That's the only reasoning that I have,
Sure.
because yeah, nothing else. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, we had, on average, we'll have 180 bushel corn
Okay.
on an average year,
Yeah.
170 to 180. We had 30 bushel corn in 2012. Or even this year, I've thought about this past year a lot too. We had very little rain,
Mm-hmm.
especially during, we got the most opportune rains all summer long. And there's no reason we had crop the way we did um, other than what God can provide to us. And yes, it is the genetics of the seed that we have developed.
Right. Yeah, but
But
there's.
once again, it comes back to God gives us the ability to develop those genetics.
Mm-hmm.
And those rains still came out. Those opportune rains still came, and we were able to harvest a decent crop.
Right.
So my metaphor for God providing is always farming. And I think it's probably just because that's what I've grown up with, and I still do.
Yeah.
There's just so much out of our control with farming that is the only thing that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's my personal opinion. How about for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I just think that there is so much faith involved with the act of farming. I mean, you're absolutely right. And just, and noticing in the midst of that the way that God provides. Yeah. Yep. I'll never forget, it was 2017. I was serving Burke Herrick, and it was in August that was just punishingly hot, and just everything was dry, and it had been a decent spring and a decent summer, early summer for rain, but then it's getting the middle of August and the rains aren't coming, and then things are getting dry, and people are getting really stressed out. We're not being very nice to be around anymore. And then just one Saturday morning, it just absolutely uncorked, just the most gorgeous 2.5 inches you'd ever seen, just the perfect rain. And I walked into church on Sunday, and a little guy named David, who's now in middle school, which makes me very sad because he shouldn't be that old, comes and just says, "My dad says that was a $10,000 rain." And I was like, "Your dad is right. I know what just happened. Your dad is absolutely right, because
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the difference between what are we going to do, and we are going to run our harvest and do the best we can." Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so one experience that comes to mind for me happened during my freshman year of college. I had kind of been a little bit thrown into the deep end of ministry, campus ministry, because during my first semester, I was attending a Bible study on campus. And then about 3/4 of the way through that first semester, the guy that was running the Bible study pulled me aside for a cup of coffee and said, "Hey, by the way, I'm leaving school to be a missionary in China. And so someone needs to lead the Bible study. And we voted for you." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Never done that before. I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll see what happens." And ended up doing that for, about 3/4 of the spring semester. And then it was just one of those like crazy crappy weeks where like I was in band and chorus, and so we had to go out and do tour, and we had some other stuff going on, and I had some big tests going on, and like you could just tell that I was absolutely just to the top of stress and just about to just throw everything out the window. And a friend of mine that was a part of the Bible study came and just said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "No, no, no, no. Are you okay?" And she's just like, "I can tell that this is just a lot for you right now. And so what would you say if I were just to lead the Bible study next week? Just get that off your plate entirely. and just, that's one less thing to worry about because I know this stretch is crazy right now. And like, just the care of that person in that moment was just such a relief for me, and then also just just such a proof of God's provision, because
Mhm.
that was just like getting something that refreshed me to the point that I could continue. Like it was daily bread. It was that idea of sustaining me in the midst of a hard time. And yeah, it was just kind of that the care and concern of people around me.
So, how about as a pastor, when you're always called to care for others, and that can be extremely exhausting, what kind of sustains you through those moments?
Yeah.
Or how does God provide for you during those moments?
hmm Yeah, so I have really, really good colleagues and friends. There was a season in ministry, just kind of in previous appointments where just things were like there's normal church like drama and just normal church like busy. This was beyond that. And what ended up happening is I had a friend and pastor colleague that would text me every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. Like she would set an alarm in her phone to send me a text and just remind me that I'm being prayed for. And then she would pray for me. And like, just that simple act of someone caring. And like it wasn't just like, for the first month or so or just a couple times. It was just every single Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. I just knew that text was coming. I knew that someone cared in that situation for me in the midst of it. And so that has been extremely powerful, and something that I have sought to return and pay forward, because there are other friends and colleagues that go through crazy stuff too, because the church is sometimes um, a hard place to navigate when you're in leadership. But yeah, that's definitely like what comes to mind immediately when I think about the being cared for in the midst of caring. Kind of that idea of being the pastor to the pastor. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, there's another colleague now who is a district superintendent that very much has that mantle of ministry upon himself. He really sees himself in that role, and he and I have stayed connected through prayer and through text messages like that before too, where he's just,
Sure.
yeah, like he's like I said, he's a DS now, and this is the time when our cabinet starts to meet to appoint pastors to new appointments, and I've definitely reached out to him and just said, hey, thinking of you, and I just know that there are some hard conversations coming, and just even though I don't know the details of those, I don't know where those hard conversations are happening. I just know that based on it being appointment season, that hard conversations are happening. And so
Mhm.
I was able to able to pay that forward since I know how powerful that has been for me. I'm able to pay
Mhm.
it forward.
Right. How about when you're called to, I don't know, a tough situation or maybe a tough sermon that you just don't know what to say? How do you figure out what to say or
Yeah,
what to do? Or like,
yeah,
what is that God moment like?
yeah. I mean, it's sometimes incredibly challenging. I mean, like take for instance, when I served in Burke, we went through a tornado. And like we were one of the only places in town with power, and we were the biggest space left, and so our building was being used and utilized left and right, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. So I knew Sunday was coming, and so we got to do something. You got to say
Mhm.
something, and just um yeah, that is such a moment where like just really just leaning on God in prayer and saying, I don't know. I know we need to do something. know we need to say something. We're not going to be able to just, ignore this community altering thing that just happened. God, give me the words. I mean, just truly, truly give me the words. Yeah, and I was inspired that Sunday specifically. I was inspired by another pastor whose sermons I listened to on a regular basis, Nadia Bowles Weber. She was the pastor at House for All Sinners and Saints in Denver, Colorado, Lutheran congregation in Denver. And their congregation had gone through something kind of traumatic, and she just took one of the Psalms as kind of her kind of her model of sermon that day. And I was able to kind of recreate some of that spirit in the message. And, I feel like it went really well. It was received very well by the congregation and the community. And just, that was definitely it was totally not my thing. It was definitely a God thing, and definitely just, God working through whatever this is to make something good come from it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it is just relying on God and going to God in prayer, and just, that's where that we were talking last week. That's where that listening part becomes so important, of just, making myself open and available to a movement of the spirit, and then waiting in silence and expectation that it's going to happen. And then, sitting down and writing and praying over that and sending it to a friend and saying, what do I do with this? And is this okay? And kind of giving, kind of relying on that strength of community again, so.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it's just people having the support of friends and family to get you through. That's why we're called to not be alone, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it was in a different context, but there's a reason why, when God made Adam and put him in the garden, and Adam didn't have a helper, God told humanity that it wasn't good for humanity to be alone, and so he gave him a romantic partner, which is how we usually talk about that text. But it still just is not good for humans to be alone. We are communal people. A professor that's taught at both USF and Sioux Falls Seminary, Stan Grenz, wrote a book about how we are just hardwired for community, and like looked at the theology of community, and how we reflect the nature of God when we are in community with each other.
One thought that came across my mind this week, and I don't know if we can talk about it maybe or not, but um, was the passions that we have been given by God and how that sustains us and gets us to wake up in the morning and keeps us going. You know, it, without purpose, we don't want to do anything, right?
Right.
And so I think that's another way, that God feeds us, or
Mm-hmm.
we feed off of certain things, right? I listen to podcasts and stuff, and they talk about, and just even in our own hiring, like
Mm.
people care less about the amount of money they're going to make if they have purpose.
Yes.
And I think that's huge, in knowing that what we do has an impact on other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of along the lines of, communal, and being with others, but to really have an impact on others, and how
Yeah.
that, um, the ability that God gives us to have impact on others, we really feed off of,
Mm-hmm.
and is really something that helps sustain us. And I think, when we talk about daily bread, that daily drive that we have to help, I think is just something that God gave us, and we should really be thankful for.
It strikes me that the phrase in the prayer is "Give us this day." So it's a communal prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. Not just give me my daily bread. Again, just like how we've seen in the last couple of phrases with the "Thy will be done" and the "Thy kingdom come" and "Thy hallowed be Thy name." This is still that same energy of this prayer pushes us outward. It helps us to really claim our communal reality. Like, we are not just single Christians doing this faith life on our own. We are the body of Christ. We are a communal people, and so when we're talking about our daily bread, it's like, yeah, this is something that sustains all of us.
Okay.
The only thing I wish would have gone differently, because sometimes it works out really well that like a message like this is paired with communion.
Mm-hmm.
But because this is the bread sermon, because of how the prayer is laid out, and because of where Lent is, and because of how the sermon series got planned, I probably could have like bumped up communion a week and done communion
Mm-hmm.
last week, or done it this last weekend, this coming week, because we do it on the first Sunday of the month. But like, it's the only thing I wish we would have done differently, and it's entirely my, doing or whatever, or not doing or whatever. But just that, I think that would have brought it home a little bit more solidly. But
Yeah. No, I get that. It ties together nicely, and you can just kind of segue right into your breaking bread and everything else, and it just the transition works really well, and clean.
yeah,
The presentation's nice. And,
yep,
Mhm.
yep.
Oh, I can picture it. I get it. Well, let's talk about next week. What do we have on the docket for next week?
Yeah, so we are going to be jumping. The next phrase that we're going to be looking at is "lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." And so it'll be the idea of that phrase reads funny because it sounds like we're telling God to like that God would lead us into temptation if we didn't ask him not to. We're saying lead us not into temptation. Um,
Yeah, I never thought of it that
so
way.
yeah, so like it's just kind of it reads funny, but like that's not what it means. Like God will not lead us into temptation just because. There are
Mhm.
times when we are tempted. Don't get me wrong. There are times when we are tempted, but that's more of when we're leading us. When we're leading us and how we would want to be led, that's when we fall into temptation. God does not look for opportunities to, tempt us, but rather, we are asking God to truly, truly lead us. So we're going to be digging into that reality of what it means to be led by God, and just the different ways that means that we have to yield to what God wants sometimes, and yielding is hard. So
Sounds good. I was
yeah,
just going to mention, I appreciate you going through something like this, and we kind of talked about this a couple of weeks ago too, but just something that we do from memory that we don't really think about what we're saying. I appreciate going through it in more detail and really thinking about the words and what they mean. Because, like you just said, I never thought of it that way. But when
right.
you actually read the literal sentence, that's how it reads. And so I
Yes.
appreciate you stepping through all of this. Thanks for joining us on this week's Cut for Time podcast. Join us again next week at 10 a.m. on Church, on Facebook Live, or for the podcast next week.
Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.